Our project is Gyro Cup. My name is Porter.
I'm Luke.
My name is Ricky.
And my name is Andreas.
The Gyro Cup utilizes kinematic properties such as angular momentum to minimize spilling by keeping the cup at an even level. And this was designed to aid those with tremors or jerks in their hands, such as those with Tourette's or Parkinson's disease. And our first model was inspired by camera gimbals that they use to film things such as movies. And our system uses a 3-ring, 3-axis system that rotates to keep the cup level.
The issues with our first design that you can see on the right are that the 3D printers weren't big enough, so we had to split it into 2 sections. So we had to glue it, and it wasn't perfectly even. We had not smooth rotation with the rings because they weren't lubricated well, and there was a lot of friction going on. And if you look at the photo, you can see that there's nuts on the ends that tighten down the bolts. And what we didn't realize with the first prototype was that when we tightened down the bolts, the rings would no longer move. So we had to come up with an idea to fix that, which we'll talk about in the next slide. The handle, as you can see, was a little bit too big and it was uncomfortable to grip. And the rings that we printed at that size weren't big enough. So we had to figure out a way to get a bigger cup without changing the outside size, the outside ring, without making it any bigger, because it was already pretty big with the first prototype. The improvements that we made from the prototyping. So the first one was, as you can see in the picture, we made the handle shorter, less wide, and we gave it an angle so it'd be a little bit more comfortable on your wrist. We made each individual ring bigger without making, or the inside rings without making the outside ring bigger. So that way we utilize the space in between a little bit better, because we didn't want to make it any bigger because we didn't want it being too heavy or just to be too big in general, because the 3D printers we had were already limiting us in terms of how big we could make the prints. So one thing that I talked about the last slide was the spacers. So when you tighten down the spacers, all the tightening force goes on the spacers, but it allows the bolt to stay in the same place. So it basically completely solved the issue of the bolts being too loose in the holes and not being able to move without everything staying in the same place. And we also put lubrication in each of those spacers to make sure that things were flowing smoothly, and we got rid of that roughness issue.
Through our material research, we found that PLA is very cheap, it melts at high temperatures, and it's relatively weak. So we decided to go with PETG, which is food safe, UV resistant, and moisture resistant. Our actual prototype was made out of PLA, but if we were to manufacture this in the real world, we would most likely use PETG, as it seems like the more appropriate option for a gyro cup, which would hold liquid. If we were to make this in the real world, 3D printing is a cheap way to produce products, meaning we could manufacture our gyro cups for a relatively low price. We could also create different sizes of the gyro cup for different types of cups, so that it would be more accessible to more people. Our gyro cups are also easy to assemble. This means that there's a relatively quick turnaround time. We can manufacture these gyro cups fast and have them ready to be shipped very quickly. Buyers could be placing their orders and we could be printing at the same time, since it's a relatively fast print. And it's very profitable, and our idea of selling this would actually be really realistic. The 3D printed material we could use is also, or we would use, is also a very lightweight material compared to other things like steel. And as I said before, it's also very cheap. So our real-world implementation would go smoothly and very well.
And some words of advice for next year students would be to definitely try to get started as soon as possible on your FEDD projects. Since this project is basically the main focus of the course, it's really important that you start sooner, because some of the projects can actually take a very long time to make. Another goal should be to set a realistic timeline for every milestone and design iteration. Time can definitely be your biggest ally for this project, so you should try to make sure to take full advantage of the time that you get. And as a group, we certainly feel like we followed this advice and set realistic goals within the time we were given. We never ever like felt that we were under any pressure to get our project done. Also, you should try to find bigger 3D printers around campus. The ones that we used for our project were smaller than we would have liked. Poe and Lampy have bigger printers, so you should get in contact with the people that can use them so you can print there. Bigger 3D printers will also ensure that you do not have to splice your prints in half to fit inside the printer. And also, bigger printers will provide more consistent printing results. And finally, if a project idea seems a little bit difficult or time consuming, you should still consider going for it because it will be worth it in the end. One of the things we actually wanted to implement into our project was electrical gyroscopic components. And we felt that this idea would actually teach us a lot about how these devices and electrical components work together. So if you have the opportunity to go for a more difficult project, you definitely should, because we feel like you'll learn a lot from it.
And that is our presentation on our project. Thank you.